Tonight's moderators are Dr. Dominador V. Acoba Jr. of the Philippines and Dr. Amila Ratnayake of Sri Lanka. Dr. Amila Ratnayake is a colonel of Sri Lanka Armed Forces, a consultant surgeon of Army Hospital Colombo in Sri Lanka, and an adjunct associate professor in Uniformed Services University of the Health Sciences in Maryland, USA. Dr. Dominador V. Acoba Jr. is a lieutenant colonel in the Armed Forces of the Philippines Medical Corps. He is the head of the Medical Corps Department Health Service Education and Training Center. He is also the Assistant Commandant of the Armed Forces of the Philippines Health Service Command, Health Service Education and Training Center. He is the head Department of Surgery in V. Luna Medical Center of the Armed Forces of the Philippines. Ladies and gentlemen, our conference moderators, Dr. Amila Ratnayake and Dr. Dominador V. Acoba Jr.
Dear colleagues and friends of the Asian Collaboration for Trauma, good evening and welcome to the 12th of a series of interactive virtual encounters and the first webinar for the year 2022. Still, with our fighting journey through this pandemic, we are able to deliver our educational goals through a novel and virtual platform. And for this, we are very thankful to a number of speakers and reactors who have accepted our invitation to participate in this webinar series. And of course, to our education partners, industry sponsors, and our global audience for supporting this venture. Surgery and traumatology were born 3,300 years ago in ancient Greece during the ferocious clashes of the antiquity, where warrior heroes had to treat their fellows, in an era when heroes and gods, myths and legends were indivisible. Anatomy and surgery share a common bond, forged in the ancient battlefields. The notion that surgical interventions during wars greatly contributed to the development of surgical practice was summarized in the Hippocratic aphorism, "War is the surgeon's school, and everyone who wishes to practice surgery must go to war." Originally translated, Hippocrates stated that he who would become a surgeon, therefore, should join the army and follow it. The first description of organized surgical care is given in Homer's epic poem, Iliad, which narrated the Great Trojan War almost 3,000 years ago, where a fierce clash lasted for 10 years between the Trojans from the city of Troy and the Greeks. Many other battles had already taken place in human history, but this was spectacular in numbers and brutality as the ancient Hellenic world collided with Trojans during a long-lasting siege. A blend of history and mythology created Iliad's epos, which included the starting point of surgical science. It was a time when all sciences were founded and developed in this small part of the world, the Hellenic Peninsula. Machaon, a Greek heroic warrior and king who ascended to a deity in the ancient world, is the first documented surgeon, rejoicing a blended nature of human hero and god physician. In Greek mythology, Machaon was a son of Asclepius and the older brother of Podalirius. He and his brother led an army from Trica in the Trojan War on the side of the Greeks. In an era of myths and brutality in the Hellenic Peninsula, Machaon planted the seed for the most prestigious branch of medicine and became the father of surgery. In his name, battle and medicine were attached together and glorified. His divine origin granted prestige to the discipline of surgery, which was celebrated in his name by Homer. Machaon became the first documented surgeon of the history of medicine, opening the way to surgery's evolution through the eons to come. And so today we have some of the world's brilliant military and trauma surgeons sharing with us their experiences in the battlefield, the proper school for surgeons. We are deeply honored to have Dr. Anthony Redmond, Professor Emeritus of International Emergency Medicine at the Humanitarian and Conflict Response Institute at the University of Manchester, Dr. Mansoor Ali Khan, Honorary Professor of Surgery at Brighton and Sussex University Hospital, Colonel Todd Rasmussen, Professor and Vice Chair for Education in the Department of Surgery at Mayo Clinic, Rochester, Minneapolis, and Lieutenant Colonel Victor Reva, Assistant Professor of Surgery, the Department of War Surgery at the Kirov Military Medical Academy in St. Petersburg, Russia. We are also delighted and thankful to have illustrious panel of reactors composed of some of the intelligent minds in trauma and injury care. They are Dr. Gabriel Salazar of the International Committee of the Red Cross, Dr. John Crozier, a vascular and endovascular surgeon at Liverpool Hospital in Southwest Sydney, Lieutenant Colonel Brian Gavitt, trauma surgeon and surgical intensivist in the United States Air Force, and the newly promoted Colonel Domingo Chua, Chief of Medical Professional Staff, the V. Luna Medical Center, Armed Forces of the Philippines Health Services Command. They will be properly introduced later. Moderating today's webinar will be Colonel Amila Ratnayake of Sri Lanka, Consultant Surgeon of the Army Hospital in Colombo, Sri Lanka, and Adjunct Associate Professor of the Uniformed Services University of the Health Sciences, or USUS, at Maryland, USA, and Lieutenant Colonel Dominador V. Acoba, Jr., Head of the Department of Surgery of the V. Luna Medical Center, Armed Forces of the Philippines Health Service Command. Today is also the day when we started these active webinars. And looking back a year ago, I want to reflect on what a marvelous year it has been. This webinar has more than 6,300 participations to date, with an average of 545 audience per webinar. Together, through hard work and perseverance, we were able to overcome the obstacles brought by the COVID-19 pandemic and deliver to our fellows and friends the highest quality of trauma education that is a very important tool in the care of our injured patients. And for this, my deepest gratitude goes to Dr. Chuming Turk, our Scientific Program Director, Dr. Amit Gupta, our Education Committee Chair, Dr. Raj Menon, the Scientific Program Co-Director and Vice Chair of the Education Committee, Ms. Rinselin Hekban, our Officer in Charge of the Secretariat, along with Ms. Vanessa Manuel, and Mr. Roger Michael Gold de la Cruz for the publicities. For today's webinar, I would like to acknowledge the assistance of Colonel Amila Ratnayake, our Scientific Program Coordinator and Chair of the Research Committee of ACT. They are all credited for setting up these webinars, and I am so grateful for their help. Our deepest gratitude also goes to our platform provider, ADP Pharma Corporation, represented by Ms. Cathy Mayor Carpio, without whose dedication this webinar would not be achieved. And of course, to Ms. Erica Francisco of Mega Life Sciences. We have now 238 fellows in the Academy of the Asian Collaboration for Trauma, and we hope to grow bigger and stronger during the coming years. To all the fellows, your organization is committed to providing you with the highest level of education and research. As your chairman in my midterm, I am excited and privileged to serve you all, and I am looking forward to a more fruitful year and hopefully meet you in person in the year 2022 and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Orlando. I think now is the time for the closing remarks by our Scientific Committee Chair, and also the Secretary General of the Academy of ACT, Dr. Chu Ming-ter.
May I
Yeah.
first call on Ms. Cathy to share a
Okay.
brief presentation
Yeah.
for on the occasion of birthday of our scientific program director
Right.
before he gives his closing remark. Ms. Cathy, please. Thank you. Let's share the closing remarks from the Secretary General of the Asian Collaboration for Trauma Academy.
I feel so old. Thank you. By now, you're very familiar with Hippocrates, who said that all who do trauma must go to war. And I paraphrased Hippocrates liberally. Trauma occurs in civilian and military settings. I'm a civilian, though in Singapore, all males do 2.5 years of full-time military service and up to a month of annual reservist service. I've joined the Singapore military in disaster relief operations. I've deployed with the armed forces in the Indonesian earthquake. So I've learned a lot from this webinar. How to prepare for humanitarian mission, damage control in an austere environment, doing surgery under field conditions, and of course, a database of vascular surgery in the field, all very relevant to a surgeon working under austere operations and conditions. And we listen to the comments by influential experts. All these will be put online eventually for those who have missed the webinar or for those who want to listen to the webinar again. The future of online learning. Go to the YouTube channel, look for the ACT channel, subscribe to listen to some of the best speakers in trauma for free. The next webinar will be on military and austere medicine. So stay tuned. In the meantime, good night to some, good morning, and good afternoon to others. Thank you for listening.